Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Triple P, the PatPro podcast. I'm your host, a random guy on Twitter with zero journalistic standards, PatPro. Today, however, we are bringing in a guest who has exactly that. He is the host of the Pat's Interference podcast. He's known as @Andrew Callahan on Twitter. It's the Boston Herald's own Andrew Callahan. Andrew, welcome aboard. Thank you for joining us.
You got it. Happy to be with you.
Awesome. So before we get into the meat and potatoes of the pod, Andrew, I have to ask you a question I'm dying to ask pretty much any Pat's media guy. Do you follow, like, the Twitter news breaking sphere that's not being broken by yourselves or any other members of the beat at all?
How do you mean, like Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport?
No, the thing I'm famous for, and this kind of leads into my question, is I kind of broke the Doug Marrone thing before anyone else just because I got a tip. Have you heard of me or anybody else in that sphere like a Joe Pastoris before?
Joe Pastoris I came across during parts of the coaching search, and I think my colleague Doug, who I'm sure you know, followed him earlier. I had missed your tweet. There's a lot of stuff that flies around, especially during coaching searches and even free agency. And so, I know when I was first coming up working at Mass Live, my first scoop was Gronk, after retiring, was still working out with Tom Brady, and it felt like there might be a comeback. And a lot of people didn't cite me because, even though I work professionally, I didn't have a lot of proven scoops before of a big track record. Mm-hmm. So that stuff, I usually wait to see it play out before citing anybody else, whether it's yourself or honestly, sometimes new official media members before we run with it at the Herald.
Okay, that's fair enough. That makes sense to me. It's always a question I've had since I kind of started. No, I'm not doing this. I'm just doing this to have fun. I have, one source within the orbit of the RKK sphere, and it's not like they're giving me state secrets over here, just things they hear. But it's always something I wondered on how you guys operate with like unknown information. But we're going to get past the vanity question here. Before we get down to it, I'm going to ask the listener, please like, comment, and subscribe on whatever platform you're on. It helps advance the common sense Patriots narrative. All right, Andrew, we'll lead off with some general thoughts here. With an overarching general thought here, I'm going to ask you, what's your overarching thought about minicamp and looking forward to training camp?
Yeah, minicamp nowadays, after the last CBA, is really just an extension of OTAs in that there are no pads. It's a passing camp. Mike Vrabel gave voice to this in his press conferences. So there's not as much as you can glean this year and recent years as you could when I started on the beat, even, 2018, and certainly before that when they could go in pads, which isn't to dismiss everything out of hand. It's just to contextualize, when Drake May goes 14 of 18 on Monday and then 9 of 14 on Tuesday. Again, you're missing a Stephon Diggs. They're not in pads, not a live rush. Some of the periods are in the red zone, which really matters because you look at the elite quarterbacks, in regular season play, their completion percentages are only 50%. So there's a lot that you have to consider with minicamp. But overall, I thought OTAs were good. I thought minicamp was an extension of that, not just in structure and in the drills, but in the performance. And so I think the Patriots do feel encouraged. And the reason that they do is because they canceled that third practice Wednesday before they even opened on Monday.
Yeah, that's something I was actually going to ask about because I know Belichick had done that in, the later years of his tenure year there, and Gerard did it last year. Do you think that's common around the league for the third minicamp practice to kind of be like that team building, that camaraderie practice, and kind of just leave the media out of it?
Sorry, say that one more time. there was a comparison to Mayo.
Yeah, so like when we're looking at, the third OTAs, stuff like that, or the third minicamp, I should say, I've seen in the latter years, Belichick, Gerard have all canceled them and kind of worked on more towards like a gelling of the team. Is that more common across the league than like a lot of people think?
Yeah, and it is situation dependent, because again, if you're a new coach, you get to start earlier. You get to have more time with players and your assistants than you do if you're a guy who's in his 7th year. And so, Gerard started late last year. I didn't think that was the best idea, but Mike Vrabel canceling the last practice, as it were, is really just a read on how far your team is, what you could accomplish with that day, and is it better to meet with players and emphasize things like we heard from him Tuesday. Hey, these next 5 weeks, believe it or not, are the most important of the offseason. How well you get into shape, how well you stay into shape, your mindset coming into training camp where you could put pads on to practice real football. So in his estimation, given all the practices they had, the meetings that they had, players were still in on Wednesday. And I know that's something other coaches do, especially those who are starting a program, because it's already been kind of a long spring.
Gotcha. And I think that point about him, I mean, stating to the media, we all know that coaches use media to talk to the players, but I mean, really just stating outright, we expect you to be, training to be in shape for these 5 weeks that you're not under our direct supervision. I think that's super important from a team standpoint to set those expectations both inside and outside of the building. That way, when the team comes back for training camp, there's no slowdown. There's no, oh, I got to go to the conditioning field. I think he really just feels like they can just get right to the meat and potatoes and really, really grind it out until the start of the season. Am I wrong in feeling like that?
Yeah, I'm not gonna dismiss anybody for feeling differently. I mean, I think it's a matter of understanding that, whether it's OTAs or minicamp or even training camp, like it's part of a whole season, and going 100% or hitting the gas throughout the entire thing might tire you out in a way that we've seen the Patriots towards the end of the season, honestly, most of this decade, right? Even going back to 18 and 19, the team didn't finish as well as it needed to, playing the most important football after Thanksgiving. So, when people, and this happens on radio, it happens on podcasts, it happens on TV, really just clutch their pearls or think a certain way about what the team is doing, whether they should do more or should do less. I always just try to keep that big picture in mind of, okay, where does this fit into the larger puzzle of what they're trying to accomplish now and in the long term?
You're kidding me. You take a global view of everything and not just a day-to-day view like some shows from 2 to 6 on a certain radio?
Yeah, believe it or not, there are other perspectives. It's a wild world out here.
That's insane to me. I would have never guessed. Okay. So I'm going to get to Drake May here because obviously he's the franchise quarterback. He's the most, important thing. What do you think? What do you hear about Drake May's improvement when it comes to a grasp of the offense? I know on your pod yesterday with yourself and Giardi, you were talking about May's leadership style, but I want to know, in the 3 OTAs you've witnessed, the 2 minicamp practices you witnessed, is there a comfortability with the system that's more noticeable for Drake every time you kind of lay your eyes on him?
Yeah, I think too, speaking about taking a bigger picture and a longer term view, growth is not always linear. So a fine encapsulation of that, honestly, again, is Monday, he goes 14 to 18 in team drills, setting all the context and important details aside. Tuesday's 9 of 14 with an interception. You would call that, oh my God, it's a down day, or did he have less control? Is he, getting worse or something? First of all, we all take a breath despite the breathless coverage of which I participated in the minicamp. But I would say there are flashes of comfort and command and things like that you want to see with a quarterback in a new offense. And even in the last OTA practice that the media got to see, of which we were only in for 3 out of the 9 or 10, he's making a check against man coverage. And that sets up his longest completion of the day, which was his wheel route to Ramondre Stevenson, who made a great catch. But that recognition of the defense, knowing how to make the signal, what it means, your solutions, so that when you need to problem solve on the fly, you can do it. Of course, it is very different, though, when he knows he's not going to get hit, because those are the rules of minicamp and all the stuff we've already said. No pads, certain players are not out there with him, et cetera, et cetera. So as much as you can see in the spring, I'm encouraged. He still needs to do more in the way that every quarterback in a new system needs to do more. I'm not going to make any big proclamations off of May and June, but the little you can say, it's positive.
All right, I'll take that. Now, I just want to stay on May here for a minute. I kind of crashed out on Twitter yesterday. I've been known to do that about the pick he threw yesterday and the subsequent clip that the Patriots social media team posted about it. What can you tell us without, getting into trouble with, formations and stuff like that? Was the route even really open? It just looked like Kyle Williams didn't even attempt to fight for the ball. Like, was it just that good of a play by Gonzo? What happened there?
Yeah, well, first of all, again, this isn't to bring a fire extinguisher to anyone who's upset about, quarterback throwing an interception, but it's something close. Like, this is the time that coaches want players to test their own limits, find out what they can do with themselves and with certain receivers and develop that chemistry. And bottom line, that invites mistakes. So it's better to figure out now that, hey, if I want Kyle Williams on a go ball, how far do I need to throw it? Does he like it better angled towards the sideline? Does it matter the type of corner that he's going against? And obviously, Christian Gonzalez, being 6'2" and a world-class athlete, and already one of the best corners of the game, is a big factor here. So Kyle lost off the line. Gonzo ran the route for him and was right in front of me when he made the pick, and he was about a step and a half ahead. And those are plays that Christian Gonzalez makes, and those are plays that Drake May needs to find out with Kyle Williams. Can I make this happen? And to give the kid a shot. And I'll give you another example. Kyle Williams had a catch in the back left corner of the end zone when they're in the red zone and they're at the 10-yard line. And Joshua Dobbs throws this pass. Excuse me, it actually was Drake. To the back left corner. He makes the catch 2 feet down. Marcus Jones sticks his hand in, and as they tumble together to the ground out of bounds, rips it away. So this big celebration from the offense goes mute because he didn't score. Fast forward a period later, Josh Dobbs throws that same ball, which I don't think was the best matchup, but understanding Kyle Williams as a rookie had just won the route, lost the catch. He wanted to give him another shot. It was a poorly thrown ball. Kyle didn't get to it, but this is the time for that. Hey, let's try to build your confidence. Let's try to figure things out. So whatever they post to social media, frankly, is completely immaterial to what happens on the field when it matters in September or in October. It was a nice play by Gonzo and Drake trying to figure out and build some chemistry with the rookie.
All right. Well, that's important context for, us who don't get to witness these practices, who just have to go by what you and all the great beat guys report and, some video. I wish they would post some more video. I know they probably can't or maybe don't want to, but gosh, I really wish they would post more content of Drake May throwing that ball. Um, but that's aside. So I want to look at the rookies a little bit here. I know it's a passing camp. There's really not much Will Campbell can do. I heard he might have had a false start yesterday, but other than that, like, do you even really notice that he's out there? Like, I know he's going against Keon White on some of these reps. Like, what do you see there?
Yeah, I spend less time looking at the linemen during minicamp and OTAs because, again, they're not run blocking. Everyone knows they're pass setting. I mean, you'll have a draw in here that you'll probably see like 2 draws per practice at a 60, 70 snaps total with the 11-on-11 periods, which are more limited. But I would say Will Campbell, in the times that I have glimpsed at him and includes giving up a sack here there to Keon White, looks the part. And I think part of his game that he's not able to unleash as it is right now is that physicality, obviously, but also a relentlessness and a toughness, because that only happens when the pads come on. So what will be more telling is not just when he can run block and, physical and tackling and blocking and all this, is I think just when he's able to tap into that. Because right now, as someone who did a big profile on Will and listened to a lot of people, just said he's a different human being when he steps on that field. I think that's true to a degree in minicamp and OTAs, but you don't get to see what they called football Will, until the pads come on. So he's looked fine. And the fact that, honestly, this is the biggest part. The coaches have been willing to stick him there as a starting left tackle every single practice, every single snap with the top offensive line when the media has been there speaks louder than anything I could say here on the podcast.
So you answered my follow-up question. He hasn't done anything else but play that left tackle position, right?
Correct.
All right. Now, Travion Henderson, I don't believe he's signed his contract yet, but I don't think that matters. Are we looking at him to kind of have a pretty significant role early on here, or is it just, again, it's a passing camp, there's nothing much for him to do?
No, I think that's definitely fair. And it's not just that Travion Henderson was a second-round pick and he's got all this burst and speed. You look at the history of Josh McDaniels' offense and the usage for the running backs, there was a long stretch there, and I say this as a non-fantasy guy, but you could pick the best value if you were drafting Patriots running backs in fantasy was the guy you expected to get the least amount of touches because inevitably he would rise up the ranks. James White for so many years, right? And I know a lot of people want to make that easy comparison. Maybe Travion will be a 3rd down back. He's a 3 down back, in my opinion. But for now, they're going to distribute the touches with him and Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson. So he will have a role. I think they're still figuring that out. And I wouldn't rule out the possibility that he maybe even overtakes Stevenson, who's frankly had a couple of down years here, right? Got hurt at the end of 22 and hasn't been the same player the last couple of seasons. Obviously, the offensive line factors into that. He had an ankle injury in December 2023 that took him out the rest of the year and banged up last year. But, he's a talented player. And I think they're going to wisely dip into that position because Henderson, even right now, probably is among their 5 best skill position players. So he'll be on the field and sometimes together with Stevenson.
As a James White holder in fantasy for 2015 to 2020, can confirm he was an excellent fantasy option. But yeah, I mean, with Ramondre, especially with the fumble problems, I know Mike kind of touched on that, and there might be other factors such as the line, but I'm glad to hear that they seem to have found, again, it's not even summer yet, but have found a valuable option at that running back position. I know we talked about Kyle Williams. I do want to kind of move over to the defense here. Um, now, for me, I've been really impressed from what I'm hearing about Craig Woodson out of Cal, their fourth round pick. Seems like they've gotten it right with him so far. Seems like he's very, very fast to recognize plays, making some good plays. Would you say that's an accurate take?
Yeah, he was my best defensive rookie throughout the spring, and he's got a head start, right? I mean, he's a fourth round pick, and they took
Yeah.
all offensive players with their day one and day two picks back in April. But for me, it's his ability so far to earn the trust of the coaches to play single high, to play split safety, to roam at the second level and make plays. Like he had two pass breakups, and that was tied for the team lead on Tuesday at minicamp. And that's not the first time that he's had multiple pass breakups in a practice. So I don't know where Craig Woodson fits in the puzzle that is the Patriot safeties room, but I know he's a piece that's not going anywhere, and he'll factor in, probably at worst as a fourth or fifth option because right now he's ahead of schedule, and that's been a pleasant surprise as someone who was kind of scratching his head about the Woodson pick when it happened in real time.
All right. I'm glad to hear that. Now, I kind of want to talk about the defense as a whole, and I'm going to take the easy answer of Christian Gonzalez away. Who on the defense would you say you've been really impressed with, and why is it Robert Spillane?
So Spillane is clearly the captain of the defense. Your signal caller, your new middle linebacker. He is literally in the middle of everything. To me, looking more at that defense, I mean, you start with Christian Gonzalez, who's got 3 picks in the 5 practices the media got to go see. Moving on from the obvious, Caleb Chaison's got a little something to him, and he started with the top defense a couple of times when it came to 11 on 11s. And again, the rotations here, sometimes the coaches want to see something, you work on a technique. It's not something to put total stock into, but he's on a flyer 1 year, $5 million deal. He's a former first round pick. Maybe it just takes time for him to develop that. So he's up there for me. Keon White looks like a new player at times. Again, that's a guy who's very much kind of had a career of fits and starts and a lot of fits, frankly, towards the end of last season. But I look at those two guys on the edge, and I think ultimately, if this defense wants to reach its peak, they're going to have to get more than people expect out of that edge rush, and that will be, of course, Harold Landry, but right after him, Keon White and K'Lavon Chaisson, who so far their spring has been so good.
So, talk to me a little bit more about Caleb Jason. What is he doing? Like, is there anything specific he's doing that's really just making him stand out here?
It's his get off, it's his bend. It's the production of just kind of being around the quarterback. Even sometimes when we can't exactly tell, because you'll have coaches review the tape of practice and disagree about whether something was a sack or not, who would have gotten it in a real game setting, because once defenders get close to the quarterback, they pull up. And so when I see that, because I don't get the benefit of watching tape, I put it down as a team sack. And even those where K'Lavon doesn't get credit from me as the definitive guy who would have taken down Drake May or Josh Dobbs, remember, he's there. So it's activity, it's physical traits. And I think to me, with Mike Smith, their new outside linebackers coach, you've got one of the better pass rushing coaches in the league, in my opinion, a guy who's been around. And I think whatever is there now, K'Lavon's still like just 25, maybe 26. They should be able to get that out of him. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's a guy who averaged 1 sack per season in Jacksonville. Or maybe it's a guy who had 5 sacks in his last 7 games last year for Las Vegas.
All right. Going to stay on the defense here. You mentioned him. Keon White, I was going to say he seems a lot more bought in. I know he had the interview yesterday where, he's happy to have a coach again, yada, 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 throwing shade at Gerard Mayo or whoever else. I have no idea. When it comes to the reps you've seen, does he seem like he's got a purpose and he's not just trying to get after the passer? What does it look like?
Yeah, sometimes it's speed, sometimes it's, again, you can't really use power. So that's another piece of context when we talk about offensive tackles giving up sacks. Yes, they're always in pass protection. There's no advantage of sometimes you might run and the defense can't rush as hard. But Keon is building out his toolbox in a way that, his rookie year, I'd say it's fair to basically boil down his moves to just a good bull rush. And he had some counters, but none of them were really developed. Last year, you had a good bull rush and a really nice inside move. Now he's working on other things to complement those moves and thinking in a way that, I guess, stealing from or Mike Smith, excuse me, his position coach, you think like a pitcher. If you're going to start off with a fastball, you want to understand, okay, they might be sitting fastball next rep, or you might go changeup, or you got to bring a curveball. And so understanding that and thinking ahead is something that's new to Keon. And I'm not here guaranteeing that he's a 3, 4, 5 pitch guy, to continue the analogy. But what I'm saying is, at least now he's thinking like that. And I think that will be a benefit to a guy who, you could see this as soon as he was drafted. Yes, he's a little bit older. He's still a freak athlete. And so that's another player just like Chason. They're trying to unlock a little bit more, figuring there's physical talent there. We just have to find out a way to hone it. And he's in that process right now.
Gotcha. And they're just trying to keep him in the structure of the defense to make sure he's most valuable. Speaking of Mike White, just a little tangent about him. Every time that I've referenced Derek White over the past 3 years, for some reason I keep calling him Mike White in my friend group. That's just an interesting tangent. Now, I just kind of want to touch on the safeties here, because I do a lot of listening to Alex Barth of 98.5 The Sports Hub, and he talks a lot about the center fielder spot in the safeties room, that free safety. Are we thinking Craig Woodson's going to take that role, or is he just kind of more an inside guy? Who do you think is going to be that free safety, come the start of training camp?
So, first of all, always a good decision to listen to Alex Barth of 98.5 The Sports Hub and all the billion places that he is. Number two, I would say the center fielder role, before we get into the regular season, is going to be less important, actually, than it has been watching this Patriots defense in maybe 10, 12, 15 years, depending on how this goes, because the structure of the kind of base coverages that you saw from this defense in Tennessee, a lot of split field stuff. So you're back to talking two high safeties, and it's not just cover two, but you've got different versions of quarters, which has increasingly become more popular across the league. And that doesn't mean just, strict cover 4 in your Madden sense, where you just got, 4 guys responsible for the deep part of the field, corners and the two safeties. There's a lot of matching certain routes, and some of that develops ultimately into man coverage, all of which is to say that I think that idea that you need to fill a Devin McCourty hole with a Devin McCourty type player isn't true now. They'll be able to guard the deep half of the field with 2 deep safeties. They will, of course, sometimes spin into a single high or close safety structure, but they'll have multiple players do that, just like they did last year. And so Craig Woodson is capable of that. I wouldn't want him personally, or Kyle Duggar, or even Jabril Peppers majoring in that type of role. But I think you can get away with each of them playing that, 30% of the time, and then sharing that as a load, because ultimately all of them are better suited in a 2-high structure. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that from this defense than you had in years past. And the Patriots literally led the league in single high defense.
Gotcha. Now, who do you think's wearing the green dot coming training camp? Is that Spillane, or is that?
Yeah, definitely Spillane.
Then that gets me off my point. Now I just want to touch on one of the free agent signings, Harold Landry. Milton Williams, there's not really much he can show out. I'm sure he looks great, but I want to look at Harold Landry, because last few years in Tennessee hasn't been great for him. I keep hearing from a lot of the beat reporters that he looks fast, explosive. Do you share that same sentiment?
Yeah, I talked to Harold actually after practice the other day for a story that's coming out in the Herald next week. And this is the time for sunny quotes and rainbows and smiles and best shape of your life. I do think Harold is happier to be back in this scheme, and that should benefit him, even as a guy who had, I think it was 10 sacks last year, despite the worst win rate on the edge among edge rushers, according to PFF. And so I don't expect to see prime Harold Landry again, but I think it's fair to expect a better version than you saw last year, because the get off is there. He's not someone who's going to command extra attention until he has to. Like, I don't think the Raiders week 1 are going to say, oh my God, we got to slide protection over to Harold Landry. We got to double team him, chip him, whatever it might be. But he's a player that can win more of his one-on-ones than the Patriots have become accustomed to. And it'll be interesting to see whether his feeling about being, in his old system again and being, best shape of his life, or he feels better than he ever has, faster than he ever has, translates. Because we'll be able to see that starting in the second week of practice, when they do one-on-ones with the offensive lineman in the back part of the field, and of course get to 11-on-11s with full pads.
So maybe do what Josh Uche always hoped he could do, and actually, get off and get to the quarterback when there's coverage dictated somewhere else.
Yeah, and he's done that before. It's not to dismiss Harold. He just had a serious knee injury a couple of years ago. And he's at that age too where pass rushers start to fall off. So he's working on new techniques. Again, not to reference Mike Smith for the billionth time in this podcast, but I think it's a good match. It's a good time for him to land here. It doesn't guarantee anything because again, everything is just a little bit rosier this time of year, and that's fine. That's what it's for. But I want to see it. I'm just more open to the possibility than the guy who had a down year last year, and we all just assume that decline will continue because that's what happens to older players.
Once again, solid, reasonable takes. We do have a listener question here, and this will kind of wrap up the pod. This question comes from Stephen Coakley, and it is about rookie left tackle, but not the one we're thinking about. So how is the other rookie left tackle, Marcus Bryant, looking? And it's a two-parter. What are the chances that Jack Conley can stick at that left guard spot?
Yeah, again, going back to what we said about the rookie left tackle everyone thinks about, Will Campbell, it's really hard to judge, and this is not just from a media standpoint. You can go find the Mike Vrabel quotes, offensive lineman this time of year, but the fact that Marcus Bryant has repped with the second team offense, or the one that's working with Joshua Dobbs, is encouraging. I like that they put him at both tackle spots, and again, this is the time to mix and match and find out what guys can do, even if it means letting up a sack in OTAs or getting picked off or whatever. But he looks the part. And again, especially for a 7th round pick who does have experience at both spots in college, that's encouraging to me. I'm not going to extrapolate anything from this or project moving forward. But, when they made the pick, I go, honestly, it's probably what I would have done. Like, it makes sense on a lot of different levels for the reasons I just mentioned, his experience, his versatility. And so we'll see what that means come summer. As for Jack Conley, yeah, I mean, Wes Schweitzer's retirement does wonders for his chances, I think, of making the roster. He's another guy that's rotated, not been a staple of kind of their backup offense, but he'll need to continue building. Like, this is not such a bad offensive line room like we've seen in past years, where it's like, if you can just stay on 2 feet and have a pulse, you'll probably make the team if you're wearing a jersey in the 50s, 60s, or 70s. It's better now. It's not worlds better, but that's a guy that, when they signed him, among all the undrafted free agents, looked and said, he might make the team. That hasn't changed for me. I don't think it's a likely chance, meaning more than 50%, but it's big enough that as we continue to watch practice, he's someone I'll have my eye on.
Do we know what happened with Wes Schweitzer? I mean, was it injury? Was it he just any idea?
He, I think, is at a point in his career and his life without having any kind of definitive word on this that, this has happened to other offensive linemen. You're in your early 30s. He would be going on year 10, a lot of wear and tear. You kind of just decide whether or not you want to do that, and understanding this is going to be a pretty physical, punishing program with Mike Vrabel. Do you want to go through it again, especially if you don't start or maybe even make the team? He made his decision despite getting to start a lot of periods in OTAs and minicamp. So I don't know for sure. Mike Vrabel hinted at some personal matters going on with players who miss practice at minicamp, and so that stuff I tend to leave alone. But given the timeline and honestly the history of guys who've done this, Jared Veldheer did this 6 years ago, and he was more accomplished than Wes Schweitzer. Just said, it's not for me, and retired in 2019. So I'd imagine it's a combination of things, and it starts with whatever's personally going on for him.
All right. Well, just a side note on Marcus Bryant. Do you think it was like a troll job by the Patriots to draft, in the first round, the left tackle with the statistically short arms and the short wingspan and the shoulders and all that stuff, and then in the 6th round or wherever it was, draft the tackle with the statistically freakishly long arms but freakishly small hands?
No, honestly, I think there are people who are probably in the building not even aware of that fact, which is not to say that they are bad at their jobs. I think it's just one of those things that, people like you and me are on the internet and doing a lot of studying on the draft, and don't have the access to the things that they do, find out and unearth and come to them, or like, we didn't even know that. Much like Elliot Wolf didn't know that, folks with Will Campbell's wingspan since 2011 have never made a Pro Bowl or an All-Pro team. So, no, I don't think it was a troll job, but certainly interesting.
Shocking news. People who are terminally online know weird stuff that the people who are actually doing the jobs don't. Wow.
Yes.
All right. So that's going to go ahead and wrap up the pod here today. Andrew, I cannot thank you enough. Please tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, anywhere, bostonherald.com. We won't have a ton of content coming up, obviously, with the break here. My podcast, Pat's Interference, you'll find me at _ Andrew Callahan. Also, some clips from 98.5 The Sports Hub and NBC Sports Boston on occasion as well.
What's the YouTube channel that you started up?
So that is also at _ Andrew Callahan. That you'll find all the Pat's Interference videos. We're going to have some new breakdowns this year, which I'm very excited about, especially after games, which I will keep to myself until we get there. But we're going to try some new stuff, and I'm excited. So yeah, definitely subscribe over in YouTube.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for us. Thank you so much for listening. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. Hope everyone has a good rest of the day.